Welcome to IVF This, episode 181, IVF and Longing. Welcome to IVF This. I'm your host, Emily Ginn. After 10 years of primary and secondary infertility due to both male and female factor infertility, I am now the mother to 3 beautiful miracles. I am married to my favorite person in the world. I'm a social worker, a life coach, and an IVF warrior. I'm here to teach you how to manage your mind and emotions during your IVF journey, to break free from anxiety and regain control of your life, even in the midst of infertility. I'm going to teach you how to say IVF this to how we think about, talk about, and experience infertility. Let's go. Hello, my beautiful friends. I hope you're all doing so well. Looks like summer has officially kicked off, at least here in the US. And if you know me and you've listened to me for any period of time, the summer is the time of the year that I hate the most because I live in Austin and it's 1 trillion degrees with 90% humidity. So enjoy me in all of my summer bluster with my, I almost said my bed stains. Why would you offer that, Emily? Well, that's just what you get when you get me. So, but I hope you are all doing well. I hope you are, if it's hot outside, I hope you are in air conditioning. And if you're on the other side of the globe and enjoying a nice fall day, I hope you enjoy that as well. But we're going to talk about something that I hear from my clients a lot about, but we don't necessarily talk directly to. And that's longing. I think longing is probably one of the most common emotions that we experience going through infertility and IVF. It's a very common human emotion in general, because longing is just a desire for something that has not yet come to pass for you. So it's a very common experience. There are a lot of things that you long for in your life. I think it's a particularly challenging experience during infertility because there's not really an end. We can't tell the end. You know, we can see sort of lights at the end of the tunnel as you get a little bit closer and maybe you've had some success with your IVF, but ultimately we don't know until we're there, until we're at beta. And then once we've graduated from the fertility clinic, and then once we've hit, you know, the 12-week mark and 20-week mark with the full scan, 24-week mark with, that being the viability stage. And it just kind of we do, it's called goal posting, that the goal of what we want just keeps getting pushed further and further down. But there is something to that in-between phase. I'm gonna do a separate podcast episode on that, just kind of how to manage being in the in-between. But I think the prevailing emotion for most of us, I think we probably label it as sadness or, we label it as a bunch of different things. The prevailing emotion would be longing. I'm going to talk about it in kind of different ways. I'm going to refer to it as the ache because that's how my experience of longing felt. It was like an ache inside my body that I couldn't calm, I couldn't nurture. There was no salve for that particular pain. But you'll hear me call it a lot of different things, but ultimately the emotion that we're talking about is longing. I think this podcast episode in particular is important. You've probably heard me talk about one of the goals of this podcast is to give you a language with which you can understand and express yourself through this really challenging time. And so to name this thing so clearly as longing, as an ache, I think is a really important step for any of us kind of in this in between so that we know what's happening for us, right? We're not just angry. We're not just depresso. We're not just anxious. We are hurting in a primal, guttural, visceral way that is longing, that is yearning, that is and presents often as an ache. So again, I like to name it longing because I think that that's the most accurate description for me. If you like any of the other words that I'm invariably going to use in this podcast episode, have at it. Longing does not belong to me. You can use that word. You can use other words. Again, yearning and ache. But it is that low, deep hum of desire that lives somewhere in our body, right? Sometimes it's in the chest. Sometimes it's in the belly. Sometimes it's a throb. Sometimes it's a pull. Sometimes it's a wave that just takes your breath away. And so it's hard to describe. And let's be honest, it's even harder to carry. So if you've been experiencing infertility, if you've been on this journey, if you're going through IVF, I think you know exactly what I mean when I say the word longing. So I want to start out and be very clear about what I'm talking about today. I'm not talking about despair. Although that can be part of the experience, I'm not talking about hopelessness or anxiety or obsessive spiraling that our minds sometimes do when we're stuck in the waiting. I'm not even talking about depression or devastation. Although, again, those feelings are very real, they're very valid, and you certainly do experience them or can experience them along the way. What I'm talking about today is something a little quieter, more persistent. And it's that deep yearning for something that feels just right outside of your reach. It's not frantic, but it's not passive either, right? It just is. It's always there, it's waiting, and it's whispering. I think of the ache, this longing, as what happens when love has nowhere to go, when your desire to mother, to parent, to nurture, to hold a baby in your arms, when that lives inside of you but has no physical outlet, no tangible evidence of it working, no proof of progress. It's just the ache. And it shows up in a lot of different ways. You may feel it when you walk past the baby aisle in Target, when a friend announces a pregnancy or a birth, when you hear it in a child's laughter in a restaurant, when you're staring at an empty nursery that you decorated with so much hope, or even when everything is going quote unquote fine and you're still waiting and waiting and waiting. Let me talk to you a little bit about kind of the biology of yearning, of longing, of this ache. Mary Frances O'Connor, who wrote the book, The Grieving Brain, she's a neuroscientist. It's a phenomenal book. I highly recommend it to anyone who's interested in understanding a little bit more about grief, because grief is still kind of this black box that most of us don't understand. But she talks about how yearning is one of the most primal ways our brain tries to meet our need for attachment. When you've attached to something or someone, our brain does everything it can to keep that bond intact. That's honestly why breaking up, even friendship breakups or romantic breakups, are so challenging for a lot of us, because you have a bond and that your brain desperately clings to that bond. And even if the thing that we're longing for doesn't exist in the physical world yet, even if it's a dream, an idea, a future, it's still a bond that you've created. I talk about how one of our second transfer for what would have been our third child failed. But I had at that time, I think probably almost 3 years of bonding with that embryo. I had a name picked out. It was a male embryo. I had a name picked out for him. I could almost see his little face. There are times that I even imagined him walking across the stage for his high school graduation, and I'm clapping as the proud mom, and that's the baby of the family. And when that transfer didn't work, when I did not get pregnant and we lost that embryo, it was as devastating to me as the loss of someone I had known for years and years, because ultimately I had, right? And I think that it's important that we can recognize and articulate those embryos are still part of us, even if we don't make it to pregnancy. And certainly loss after pregnancy is as devastating and as guttural and as torturous for us to get through, because we've had a bond. Right. So this is part of why IVF and infertility is so uniquely painful, right? Because we're grieving something that hasn't happened yet, right? We're attached to a hope, a vision, a version of ourselves, a child who lives in our hearts, but not yet in our arms. So our brain sends us these little messages based on that longing, based on that yearning, that says, find them. Don't give up. Keep going. Stay close, even when we're exhausted. even when we feel broken, even when we know intellectually that we can't control the outcome. That ache, that's our brain's way of loving, of protecting, of holding on. The problem isn't the ache, it's what we make it mean, right? As always, right? The problem isn't the emotional experience, it's what we make it mean about ourselves, our lives, our family to be, anything like that. The ache itself is not the problem. Now, here's where I want to pause for a moment because this part is really, really important. The ache itself is not a problem. The ache is uncomfortable, to be sure. We don't like feeling the ache, but the ache is not the problem. It's what our brain does with the ache that often causes the pain. And I think you know what I mean, right? You suddenly feel the ache and then your brain kicks into gear. Why do I still feel like this? I should be over it now. This was never going to go away. I'm just going to feel this way forever. Something's wrong with me and I just can't let it go. Further proof that I'm too sensitive, too desperate, or too broken. And suddenly, what starts as a quiet wave of longing becomes like this massive tidal wave of shame and self-judgment. The ache itself is incredibly tender. The thoughts we stack on top of it, that's the thing that really kicks us in the gut. That's the thing that leaves the bruises. So can we tell ourselves a different story? I just want to offer, like, is this a gentle, loving invitation? As always with this podcast, you're going to take what works for you and you're going to leave what doesn't. So if these things don't work for you and really just understanding what the ache is, beautiful. If that's all you get out of this podcast, absolutely. But there is an option to kind of think about it differently. So what if the ache isn't something to fight or to fix, right? What if it's something to witness, something to honor? What if instead of resisting it or trying to numb it out, we said to ourselves something like, oh, this is the part where I ache. Of course I do. This is the part of the story where my heart is open and waiting, where I feel the absence of something that I love so deeply, it physically hurts, right? It's not a sign that I'm doing anything wrong. This is a sign that I'm alive and I have desires and wants and that I'm still capable of love and hope. The ache doesn't mean that you're weak. I think it means that you're brave. It means that your heart is still reaching for what matters to you, even when it's hard, even when the outcome isn't guaranteed. And my beautiful friends, that is something to be proud of. There's no higher testament to the love of a mother than that. There's so much pressure in our culture to be quote unquote strong, to like bounce back, to stay positive. And that pressure can make the ache feel like a failure, like it's evidence that you're not coping well enough, but it's not. You ache because you care. You ache because you hope. You ache because you're human. It's okay to feel that way. It doesn't mean you're stuck. It doesn't mean it will always feel this way or this intense, right? It's not just duration, it's also intensity, right? Longing can feel very intense. It can also be with you for a long period of time. But even if it does come in waves, that's not a sign that something is wrong. It's just a sign that you've opened your heart up to something real. I remember I carried this longing for 3 children. I had had a very vivid dream when my oldest was about 9 months old that I was going to be the mother of 3 kids. I thought at the time it was 3 little boys. And then when we had our first round of IVF and we ended up with 2 male embryos, it was like this blessed assurance that that's what was supposed to happen. And our first transfer was successful. And that's my second son and my middle child. And so I never really accounted for what it could be like if I didn't get that, right? I had already kind of planned it in my head. And then when that didn't happen and the yearning took this massively intense shift within me, it was very startling, right? Because I'd always carried this idea, I'd always carried this hope. And then all of a sudden it was less likely to happen. And I share that with you because I want you to know that even your coach has experienced the kind of longing that leaves you doubled over in the shower, like sobbing, crying, screaming to the heavens, why the hell is this happening? Right? Even after I had arguably had great success, right? But I had still had a vision in my mind of 3 children. And so to get to that place, I had to do a lot of work. I had to dig really deep in order to access some of the healing that I needed to, not to get rid of the yearning, not to get rid of the longing, because it was never a problem. But I had to do what I'm talking about now, which is stop villainizing the yearning, stop pathologizing it, making it worse or making it mean something more than it did. It just meant that the desire of my heart, I hadn't yet kind of captured it in my real life. And that's okay. So then I worked on reframes. I love a good reframe. I love a good reframe. And so one of the things that I did when kind of that ache showed up for me, I tried this. I placed my hand over my heart. You guys know if you watch my YouTube channel and watch me talk, I put my hand on my heart. It's a very grounding experience. It's called grounding through movement. It's one of the things that I do frequently. But you can put your hands wherever. You can put your hands on your belly. You can put your hands like on the armrest of your chair. But just whenever you feel that ache, that longing, just ground yourself to something. You can put your hands on the tops of your legs, whatever feels comfortable, and just say, this is the ache. This is part of loving something that I don't have yet. And it means I'm still loving, still hoping, and still trying. And just let yourself breathe into that. Let yourself soften into it, even just a little, right? You don't have to become a Care Bear, but just allow it to soften you just a little bit. This process can harden your heart, but that's probably not you, right? It wasn't me. My heart is, I like to think, I don't know if you would ask other people, but I like to think my heart is very open and very loving and very caring and very thoughtful. And in a lot of ways, the process really shrank me in a lot of ways. It didn't allow me to feel soft, right? Because we have this cultural messaging that we have to be strong, which I think just for most of us, we just interpret that as we shouldn't have any emotional upheaval. And if we do, it's very little emotional upheaval. So allowing yourself to accept that this is the ache and this is what it means. It doesn't mean anything horrible about me. It doesn't mean I'm weak or pathetic or anything like that. It just means I'm still loving, I'm still hoping, and I'm still trying. You don't have to wrestle the ache. You don't have to outrun it. You can meet it like an old friend, like a kind of a wave that visits and then it recedes, because it will, right? Even if it comes back tomorrow or 3 hours later or 3 weeks later, it will recede. If you don't fight it, if you don't argue with it, if you don't try to get it to go away, it will come to remind you of what you desire and what you love, and then it will recede, as all waves do. And you'll still be here, standing, whole, worthy, and most definitely enough. And so that's what I wanted to offer you today, my darlings, my loves. You don't need to pathologize the ache. You don't need to hide it. You don't need to judge it or fear it. We can simply allow it. We can recognize it. We can name it, and then speak to ourselves with compassion when it shows up. Because the ache is proof you aren't failing. It's proof that you are alive and you're still going for it, that you're connected and that you're reaching for something beautiful and something meaningful and something you desperately desire. It's brutal. I don't know. Brutal and beautiful all at once. I tried to mesh those and I don't think it worked, but that's what it is. It's brutal because it hurts and it's terrible and it feels awful. And it's beautiful because it's a testament to your willingness to love what you don't yet have, right? An unconditional love, the love of a mother, the love of a parent. So you're doing an amazing job, even if you're in the throes of longing, even if the yearning feels crippling, you're still doing a great job. And you are holding it together, even if you cry and even if you double over in the shower. I've had many of those showers in my lifetime where you're just screaming and crying and gnashing your teeth and just letting the water run over you to hopefully like cleanse you of the pain. And that's okay. It doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean you're falling apart. It means you're holding yourself together, because that is the most natural expression of tension that we get. Crying is a beautiful thing. So be kind to yourself this week. Be tender with your ache, because you're not alone. I guarantee it. Even if it's just me that has that in common with you, you're not alone. All right? That's what I have for you this week, my friends. I hope you have a beautiful week, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of IVF This. If you like what you've heard, click subscribe and follow to make sure you don't miss an episode. And if you want to learn more, head over to www.ivfthiscoaching.com to learn how to work together.